A few weeks ago, we talked about what Assassin's Creed Black Flag did right, and now it's only natural we talk about what it did wrong. Now let me fully clarify here, I really like Black Flag. With that said, I don't believe it's a perfect or flawless game. I don't think any game in the AC series is flawless, as I'm sure most of you can agree, but since I practically gushed over this game in my other video, I want to talk about a few of the issues I have with it. And I'm curious to hear from you guys as well what you think this game did wrong or if I missed anything. Starting off with what I believe to be one of the most disappointing changes from AC3 into Black Flag was the combat. AC3's combat is incredible. It's gritty, violent, and brutal. It flows really well. It may not look the most realistic, but I easily consider that game to have one of the best combat systems in the series. Now, Black Flag for the most part takes a lot from that combat system, but drops some little things that made AC3's combat so good. First of all, the animations in AC3 are far superior to Black Flag's. In AC3, every weapon type had lots of animations and variety with those animation sets. In Black Flag, there's not nearly as much variety with said animations, and they don't look as brutal as Connor's. Another thing, and this may be minor depending on your opinion, but there's clearly more detail to the visual damage of combat in AC3 that was missing in Black Flag. Specifically, I'm talking about how on enemies you could see visual cuts and slashes whenever you hit someone. Their clothes would splatter with blood. It just made the combat feel more visceral and violent. None of those details are in Black Flag. I'm not exactly sure why. I heard that maybe Ubisoft Montreal wanted to make combat less violent to appeal to a wider audience, but even that doesn't make a lot of sense to me since, well, A, the game is rated M anyways, and B, we're all psychopaths who love violence, so I just don't get it. But that may also explain why Edward's animations and double counters aren't nearly as brutal as Connor's. And then another huge difference is AC3 had way more weapon variety than Black Flag, and that sort of ties into why there's more animations in AC3 as well. In Black Flag, the only weapon type are those dual swords, which are very cool, don't get me wrong, and enhance that pirate fantasy the game is going for, but it would have been nice to have some other weapons at your disposal as well, because the dual swords can get a little boring to use after a while. And for me personally, I definitely preferred Connor's tomahawk, so while Black Flag takes most of the core of AC3's combat, it loses a lot of the brutality, animations, and weapon variety that AC3 had, causing the combat system to just feel like a streamlined, downgraded version of AC3's. Probably Black Flag's most prudent issue, though, is repetition. Now, this criticism can be applied to a lot of different elements of the game, but I feel where it's most noticeable is in the mission structure. Anyone who's played this game knows it has an ungodly amount of tailing missions. And keep in mind, I'm usually the one defending tailing missions. I don't hate tailing, I really don't, because it's part of the fantasy of immersing yourself as an assassin, stealthily following people, blending into crowds and bushes, and learning information. But when tailing is as prevalent, long, and drawn out as Black Flag's, it gets stale so fast. And most of them aren't even good tailing missions. It doesn't force you to be strategic and think things out. You're really just following people at a slow pace for sometimes minutes on end, and it's just not that fun, specifically after you've done it multiple times in a row. Black Flag can also feel a little repetitive in the side content. I actually really enjoy this game's side content, but for some, there's so much of the same thing, it can also get repetitive, causing that open world fatigue feeling, if you would. And finally, one of the things that was disappointing when I first played Black Flag was the lack of improvement for the on-the-ground gameplay. If it wasn't for naval combat, this game would not be anywhere near as good. And that's simply because they didn't change a whole lot at all for the on-the-ground portion of gameplay. Parkour is mostly the same, combat has some downgrades that I've already touched on, and the stealth had some small new additions, but overall nothing crazy. So I can definitely see why back then, and this is not just for Black Flag, but for the series as a whole, a lot of people felt there wasn't a whole lot of innovation in terms of gameplay with new AC games. Again, the naval combat is the big change and improvement for Black Flag, but everything involving on-the-ground gameplay remains mostly the same, and in some cases a little worse than its predecessor. Again, I know I was negative about Black Flag, but that's the whole point of the video. If you want to see me talk about the things I really like about the game, go check out my video on what Black Flag did right. And even with some of these flaws, Black Flag still remains a top tier AC game to me. But again, feel free to let me know what you thought AC Black Flag did wrong in the comments, and how the game could have been even better than it already is. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you considered leaving a like and subscribing to the channel if you're new. I have channel memberships with special perks if you'd like to support me. The link to join will be in the description. But other than that, thanks for watching and have a great rest of your day, Assassins.